So today's question, tell us, what is your favorite fall activity? Go ahead and drop here in the chat. What is your favorite fall activity? And if you'd like to let us know where you're tuning in from today, we always love to hear and see if we've got any neighbors here coming in. So we're based in DC, and I'd say my favorite fall activity is probably pumpkin patches. And I did a corn maze, a Taylor Swift corn maze that's based out of DC here, which was really fun. So that's probably one of mine. Green Bay Packers. Hey, sports are fall activities. I agree. Drinking apple cider, fire pits. Yes. Apple and pumpkin farm. Ooh, your apple and pumpkin farm. That's cool. Go Chiefs. Taylor Swift's boyfriend. Go Chiefs. We've got Southwestern Illinois, good bonfire, pictures of foliage. Yes. CC football. Pumpkin spice lattes by the fire pit. Yes, I'm seeing a lot of fire pits. I love it. And sports. It's so fun. All treats. I know, I'm so excited for it. Such a fun time of the year. We'll go ahead and keep those coming in. We're going to go ahead and just get started. We know people will be joining throughout. We want to welcome you officially to today's webinar with Megan Lucas. It is titled Harnessing Collective Impact, Strategies for Community and Economic Development. And if you know Megan, she's incredible. She has her IOM, CCE, CECD. She's so credentialed. And she also has a blog that was posted on today's Institute blog. So we'll go ahead and link that here. And as well, we just wanted to remind you that Institute is both a CAE and a CCE approved provider, which means that this webinar attendance today live does qualify you for 1 hour of CAE credit and 1 point of CCE credit. So if you are present today, go ahead and email the IOM inbox after the webinar requesting that certificate, and we'll get that your way. Again, I'll drop all of this in the chat, and then a recording of today's webinar and the PowerPoint will be available afterwards in our webinars and resource center. So give us about 48 hours and we'll have that up live for you. And then we did just want to drop a note that Winter Institute registration is open. So we invite you to register. We'll go ahead and get started with Megan. Did want to let you know that if you have any questions throughout, go ahead and type those in the chat. We will do a question and answer at the end. So it may be answered towards the end, but if anything's relevant in the moment, we'll get that answered for you as well. So we'd like to introduce Megan today. She is a seasoned community and economic development professional with more than 25 years in the industry. She's worked in several states. So she's worked in Tennessee, Nebraska, and Virginia. And she's currently the CEO and Chief Economic Development Officer at the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance. She's one of our past chairs for the Board of Trustees of Institute, and she's been an Institute faculty member for about 9 years. She's one of 15 professionals internationally that is dual certified as a certified economic developer and a certified chamber executive. So that's the CCE and her CECD. And she moved to Virginia in March of 2012 with her husband, Tori, a professor of law at Liberty University. And you can actually see Flat Tony Flat Tori in the background there throughout the webinar today. She was born and raised on a Black Angus cattle ranch, which is kind of cool in central Missouri. So with that, Megan, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Cece. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. It's good to be live, and it's a little nerve-wracking. When Cece said this is going to be recorded and you'll be able to watch it again, it makes me nervous about, being careful of what I say and actions that I take. In perpetuity, we'll be able to go back and watch this. So no added pressure there. Well, it's good to be online with you all today. It's good to see you. I don't know about you and where you're zooming in from. I hope you're comfortable. I hope you've got a nice cup of coffee or iced tea or Coca-Cola or Pepsi to enjoy while we get into talking about collective impact. I'll tell you, we're getting the remnants of tropical storms. So we are experiencing lots of flooding here and lots of rain, but the grass really needs it, and the leaves are getting ready to change, so that'll be really fantastic. So we're going to get moving. I know that CC will be monitoring the chat. I can see the chat as well, so if something pops up, hopefully it'll catch my eye and I can answer your question. So one of the things, first of all, again, thank you so much, CC and Institute team, for inviting me to teach this. This is a class that I get to teach for the Georgia Basic Economic Development course. And there it's a 3-hour course. So what I've tried to do is synthesize this down to obviously meet our time frame. And it'll really be a high-level review of collective impact and utilization of it in your community. So moving on, when we talk about community development, a lot of people will say, one of the examples I like to use when I talk about community development is the umbrella, and you'll see this pictured here. When we talk about community development, there's so many parts to community development, so many pieces to the puzzle, or so many pieces to the umbrella. And if you look at the umbrella in this picture, you see there's a yellow, there's a blue, there's a red, there's a green. And what we do in Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development is the economic development piece or the chamber piece. So the community development really is that overarching umbrella. And then those of us, depending on our specialties, we go into a specific wedge. Everything is community development. And within community development, we have economic development. And so really it is a broad term that defines our practices as leaders in our community and how we go about making a change and impact or clearing hurdles for our individual communities. And sometimes those have specific initiatives like workforce or hunger or homelessness, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we move throughout this presentation. But community development is just that, taking collective action on behalf of the community, bringing the community together to clear a hurdle or cover an issue or an opportunity. Within community development, you have economic development, recreational development plans, housing development. So community development, when we talk about it, is really a very broad term, and the umbrella represents how then it gets factored down to other areas of what we're doing. When we talk about community development, and specifically when we talk about collective impact, we talk about the process. And really, the process is bringing the community together. And that community could be the broad community, it could be a narrow community, it could be a diverse cross-section of the community. But we're bringing community together to talk about something that's impacting the standard of living. It could be workforce, it could be childcare, it could be healthcare, it could be recreational, it could be homelessness. We're coming together as a community to talk about something that's either impacting or an opportunity for the community. And we're bringing together a cross-section of people to have really participatory discussion and participatory decision-making, which then leads to a dialogue and hopefully leads to solutions or initiatives that as a community you can move forward. So collective impact, community development is really the process of bringing people together to talk about an issue that impacts the standard of living, having a lot of participation for a cross-section of dialogue. You like how I talk with my hands? And by the way, it is really interesting for me to present video because I'm so used to getting feedback from all of you, from the attendees. I'm the one that gets energy from everybody. So forgive all the movements. When we talk about collective impact, there are two impact models. And really, when you see this slide, I think that each of you can probably self-identify or self-define what is an isolated impact model and what is a collective impact model. I can see you now in my mind's eye going, oh yeah, isolated impact is probably when we have an isolated group of people who are isolated in their interest, in their organizations, and in the issue. And they are narrowly focused group isolating themselves from the larger community to have discussions to solve a problem. Sometimes as organizations, we probably do our own bit of isolating impact because we're dealing with things internally or things that really don't have to be so widely widely defined or widely impacted. But just like the name implies, the isolated impact model is a model where you have a group that are singularly of single sector or singularly focused, and they don't go far beyond themselves to create change or clear a hurdle. And then, of course, the collective impact. Uh, how do you define the collective impact? Lean back in your chair. You're probably kicking your feet on your desk saying, if I were to define the collective impact, it would be the collective. It would be bringing lots of sectors together, being more open about the voices at the table, participating in solving the problem, clearing the hurdle, or looking at whatever opportunity is you're trying to discuss and engage in. So when we talk about impact models, they're really talking two terms of isolated impact, just like that isolated thunderstorm. It's right there in one location, and it's laser focused on the people participating, the topic, the issue, and the opportunity. And then there's collective impact, which is that big thunderstorm or that beautiful ray of sunshine that is impacting all of our community and it's touching everybody and allow everybody to be warmed by the discussion, to be a part of it, and to engage. So there you have the two types of models we tend to talk about: isolated impact and collective impact. When we get into collaboration, and I, I'd like to tell you all that I believe that collaboration is the easiest part of our jobs. But honestly, I found that collaborating is really one of the most difficult parts of our jobs. I see from time to time, I'll be invited to a meeting, or sometimes I've even had the meeting, but I've been invited to be a collaborator on a project, but it only means if the person that pulled the meeting together could be the head coach, could be the completely in charge of the collaboration. And that really alters your experience in collaborating on projects. I think that collaboration and communication are two of the hardest things we do in our roles in chambers of commerce, community development, economic development, nonprofit association, because it really takes a skill to not put ourselves in the center, to be able to work with other people for the benefit of whatever initiative you're going after. So I do think, everyone, that when you ask me the hardest part of my job, I think it is collaboration. I've seen that and experienced that on a regular basis. And I'll get to another point of that, which is communication, because we can't communicate enough. And those are two areas where I think are really important and most difficult. So let's talk about the types of collaboration. So there are, in some of the, just like before, some of these titles are going to be pretty self-explanatory, I think, to you. But when we talk about predominantly, when people are mentioning we're going to collaborate, you want to look at and consider what types of collaborations are we going to get involved in. So the standard is to talk about there are funder collaboratives, public-private partnerships, multi-stakeholder collaboratives, social network collaboratives, and then the collective impact initiatives. When we talk about the funder collaborative, I think that you can understand that that one's going to be based solely on funders. A funder collaborative is typically a group of people coming together who have the financial resources to write the check to help the community clear the hurdle. They, as funders, they'll have some input, but really their interest is saying, we need to solve X problem, or we need to have an amphitheater in our community. And perhaps it's a group of funders that believe wholeheartedly in an amphitheater, and they'll come together with their private sector dollars and they'll fund it, and then they'll be finished. So the funder collaboratives, and by the way, these collaboratives, they're all different. They all play a role, and they all can be functional and useful, but they all have their unique they all have their unique catches to them. The funder collaborative is that people will write the checks and they'll be done. They don't want to be bothered with meetings. They want to know what the goal is. They'll fund the goal. They don't want to be engaged in meetings and tactics of getting it done. They just want to see the results. Public-private partnerships, oftentimes that is when a private sector organization is partnering with the local government to create a partnership of various um, opportunities, looking at initiatives that impact a community. Public-private partnerships are fairly prevalent. I'm a part of a public-private partnership, and I just can't say anything with a P enough. I just feel like I need to throw popcorn, pop, and popsicles into this discussion when we talk about public-private partnerships. But the public-private partnership is a collaborative. I have one that's between our organization, which is the Regional Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Organization, and I have a public-private partnership with the localities. And together in that public-private partnership, we have goals and we have a backbone for structure. And so public-private partnerships can work well, but they're typically limited to one or two governments or multiple governments with one private organization. And in the case of the Lynchburg Business Alliance, we are one private entity with 7 municipal partners, and that's a public-private partnership. Multi-stakeholder collaboratives, they are typically based on a series of voluntary activities. They are multi-stakeholders, just like the title or the name describes, multi-stakeholders. So across different sectors, a variety of stakeholders. They're typically, though, they're voluntary activities, and they lack shared measurements. They'll lack a support center, and oftentimes they'll lack alignment. So they'll come together as volunteers. They'll talk about what they want to accomplish. They'll try to accomplish it, but they won't have a backbone structure. They won't come up with clear goals or initiatives. And eventually what happens is they lack alignment. The social sector network, they're purposeful relationships. They're oftentimes around social issues or social opportunities. Think about the Humane Society or a running club. Those are some examples of social networks. They're oftentimes ad hoc. Maybe they've come together because somebody's upset in the community about the amount of litter that's going on throughout your region. And so they've come together, they see each other maybe on literal social networks talking about the amount of litter in a community, and then they start to loosely form themselves to go out and clean up and keep the community clean. Over time, though, they lose focus. They are typically short-termed, and they're not sustainable. And then the final collaborative that we talk about that really we're going to dive more deeply into is the collective impact initiatives. And the collective impact, honestly, includes the funders, the public-private, the multi-stakeholder, and the sector. But one of the differences when we talk about collective impact is it has to have the structure. It has to have the backbone, the support organization, has to have alignment, and has to have clear goals and visions. And that's what we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about. I'm going to take a drink real quick. How about you do the same? All righty. When we talk about the collective impact, you heard me just mention it, there are 5 key elements that need to be present for a successful collective impact. You have to come together with a common agenda or convene with a common agenda in mind. When you get the group together, and this is when it starts to get hard, all of us have an idea on homelessness or childcare in our region. And when we try and bring people together, a variety of stakeholders together, when you invite them and you say, please join us for a meeting to discuss childcare, access to childcare in our community. Everybody comes to this meeting, but they all have different ideas. They're all looking through different lenses on how what they perceive childcare is and what it should be, the reasons why it's a hurdle in the community, and they all have their own ideas how to solve it. And especially when we convene for the first time around childcare, we aren't going to just convene people who we're not just going to convene the regional supporters or the obvious supporters of childcare in the region. You want to convene everybody in your community that touches childcare in some way, shape, or manner. When you bring them together, you've got to discuss the common agenda. And you might think, oh, what? We're talking about childcare. But we all will perceive childcare in our community, access to childcare in our community, will perceive that differently. So when you bring your stakeholders together to talk about access to childcare, you have to make sure at the end of that meeting or the end of the next 3 meetings, you get to a point where our common agenda is access to childcare or creating childcare in the community. Whatever that agenda is, the collective group needs to define it. And that group then needs to be certain that this is the goal and that we all want to march forward to. Because essentially, when we're talking about the collective impact, we're all getting in the boat together, all of us. And we want that boat to be filled with people who spend their lives in childcare, who are related to childcare, who need childcare, whether it's companies that need childcare or employees or workforce that need childcare, educators. We want everybody in the boat, and we all want a paddle that only rows forward. And if you don't come together, if you don't create that common agenda in the beginning, then you'll just go in circles. So when you come together in a collective impact model, you bring together a diverse group of stakeholders, stakeholders that look through different lenses at the same topic. You want to then make sure that you create a shared measurement system. What are our goals? What will the initiatives be? What are the key performance indicators? How will we measure ourselves moving forward? Mutually reinforcing activities. So throughout the process, once you set your agenda, you create your goals and your initiatives. You may have separate subcommittees working on specific initiatives that lead to the goal. You want to be sure to include mutually reinforcing activities along the way. So when you come together as groups, you're just not reporting out. You're having some sort of activities that are reinforcing the goals or showcasing the need for what it is you're moving forward with. This continuous communication gets back to what I mentioned in the beginning. I think that collaboration and communication are 2 of the hardest things that elements of what we do in our roles as chamber professionals, economic development professionals, all of us as community development professionals. And that if you are, I don't believe that any of you are solely focused on your screen right now and what I have to say. I think if you're like me, you might have 2 or 3 other screens beside you. You probably have your phone in front of you. You might have a document in front of you that you're reviewing. You're seeing communication come in through your email. Maybe you see it come in on your social media channels right now. Communication, we're getting hit with, it's not that we're getting hit with it. There are so many forms of communication that how do we get our message out? As an organization, how do we get our message out to our members on a consistent and regular basis? It's no longer just 1 or 2 platforms for communications, it's multiple. And when you take on a project, when you're working in a collective impact model, when you're working on anything, how we communicate, how often we communicate, how succinctly we communicate is really imperative. And just when we think we've communicated enough, we really have to multiply that by 4 more times because it gets missed. Emails get missed. Messages in social media platforms get missed. They don't get seen. They don't get read. And so I think that when you come together, in my experience, on an initiative, you have to communicate. Not only do you have to communicate regularly to your stakeholders, and you don't want to over communicate, so they tune out the information and decide that they don't want to be a part of it anymore. But you have to communicate internally and you have to communicate externally, because you're coming together as a community. You've brought all these different actors and stakeholders together to talk about an initiative or a hurdle. And the community knows this. The outline community knows that some group of people are currently working on helping our community solve the access to childcare issue, or workforce issue, or insert your issue or opportunity. And you want that external communication of how are we doing as a group on this issue. Are we communicating the goals? Are we communicating the successes of the goals? Are we communicating the where we are in the KPIs? So communication is key in collaboration. And it has to be, as this says, continuous to your internal stakeholders, continuous to your external stakeholders, and continuous to, I find that I'd like to make sure that my elected officials they may not be participating in whatever the initiative you're working on, but your elected officials need to be briefed and brought up to speed and kept in the loop on what you're doing, because they are elected officials, and hopefully they're your biggest champions. But B, they also have access to funding and resources that we may or may not be aware of. You want those elected officials to sing your praises on whatever initiative is that you're working on. I do think that these conditions that are important, the continuous communication can be the most difficult, because we can have a meeting and everybody will be there and you'll say, okay, all of you know what we're doing. If you don't ask them to communicate to their networks, and if we don't communicate what we're doing as a collective to the greater community, it doesn't get done. And we can't ever assume that because we've discussed it at a meeting that everybody else knows. And then the fifth element of this is the backbone support for the organization. I think that where we see a lot of these groups fail, or a lot of initiatives fail, is coming together on a topic that is going to impact your community or is going to move the needle for growth and success. You can't expect a group of volunteers to manage all of that. You've got to have a backbone organization that is pushing forward, that is meeting reminders, agendas are out, communication is done, notes are taken at the meetings. You've got to have that backbone support organization. Oftentimes I find that it is the alliance, or the alliance, my organization, gets asked to be the backbone. I think some of you probably get invited to a meeting to talk about childcare, workforce development, and you'll give input, you'll give your thoughts and your insights. And at some point, somebody typically will turn to the Chamber of Commerce in the room and say, will you lead? Will you be the backbone of this organization? And a lot of times that's pretty flattering. It's nice to be asked. It's nice to have stakeholders in your community turn to you and say, hey, will you lead this? And I caution you, as a leader, you need to think about it. Does this relate to your mission? Do you have the resources, both in financial and human capital, to be the backbone support organization? It's okay to say, and from time to time, it's okay for you to say, I appreciate you looking to our organization to be the backbone. Although this is similar or somewhat in alignment with our organization, we do not have the resources at the time to lead on this. Sometimes I have found in that scenario, when I've communicated just that the person will say, what do you need? What do you need to be the backbone organization for this initiative? And in that scenario, the response is, that's a great question. Let me put some thought in it, talk to my team, talk to perhaps my executive board, and see what they suggest. And then you come back to them and say, we are able to do this. And I believe for us to be the backbone for this initiative, I'll need a part-time person at 25 hours a week, um, followed by salary to support them, and perhaps some financial contributions to cover costs of supporting the initiative. Sometimes what happens then is those individuals will write the check to do that. Sometimes they don't, and if that's the case, that's okay. Offer what you can, but just always be sensitive about overextending your organization. And if you become the backbone organization, you have to be really clear on these 5 conditions and helping them shape the agenda, making sure that goals are set, key performance indicators are established, and they're monitored. Helping the chairs, the leaders of the initiative to really stay focused and working. Oftentimes, we become the go-to for the continuous communication, but really, it's okay for you to be at the table and not be the backbone organization. I really want you to think about that and take that to heart. I know that a lot of times people will look to you and say, but if you don't lead in this, who else will? Well, you've got leaders around the table representing organizations from your community. Perhaps one of those other entities can take the role, and it may be more appropriate to take the role. Our community, no surprise, we are part of a group that's working on access to childcare. And for us, the perfect and the best suited backbone support organization is the United Way, because they bring all these entities together, all these nonprofits, all these businesses together to focus on issues such as access to childcare. Certainly, the Alliance could do it, but in our scenario, in this community today, it makes absolutely the best sense for the United Way to lead on that. And for us and for you in these scenarios to be a really great team member. Just because your organization isn't the backbone doesn't mean you can't be the MVP organization supporting that backbone organization. But these 5 conditions need to be considered when you're bringing a group of people together, a group of diverse stakeholders from a diversity in makeup, from industry sector, geographically, from individual, from need, and age, every element of diversity as you can have. You want those voices to be engaged in your collective impact discussion in your group. Come together, create the agenda, build out your measurement system, and you hit the ground running. One of the requirements, I've already started to begin to allude to this, as you're building out collective impact, when you're bringing a group of people together, you do need to think about the leadership, the organizational capacity, which I've mentioned, communications channels, assessments, problem solving, resource mobilization, and administrative and operational management. That administrative and operational management, that speaks to the backbone. But when you're coming together on a big initiative, you're going to either solve a problem, you're going to solve a problem, or you're aspirational. You've got a goal to create something new, whatever it is. You need to be mindful of strong leadership. You need to be mindful of your organizational capacity and everybody else's organizational capacity. Be sensitive and be sure you identify communication channels and the ways of communicating. Assessment. When we think about a childcare, for example, for us at this time, we need to assess the current baseline of childcare in our community. We can't move the needle if we're just using anecdotal talking points. If we know somebody who needs childcare, we know somebody who can't get a job because they don't have transportation to childcare. We need more than anecdotes. And any issue that you're focusing on, any opportunity, any aspiration, you need to assess the community. You need to create the baseline because that's how you'll know. You'll have real data that communicates the opportunity for you, and it will also show you the gaps, and that will help you lead the way for creating goals, strong goals, key performance initiatives. So assessing the I guess we would call that environmental scanning. Get good situation awareness of your region on the issue and the topic that you're dealing with. Problem solving skills, resource mobilization, and resources is more than just money. Yeah, resource money is important. It's always important when we're dealing with an issue. For us on access to childcare, it's about, do you have a location or locations for childcare? And we need to find resources to fund a facility. So resource mobilization is financial. It's also human capital. It's people. It's making sure that the resources you bring to the table. I like to think of the 5 Ws. Are the wisdom, bringing people together, bringing their mind, the thought leaders, the wisdom in the topic. Witness, people who believe that the issue needs to be tackled or the opportunity is really bright and needs to be engaged, and those people will go out and into the community and show witness to how great this idea is or why the need is important. Worth, that talks about the resources, the financial resources that need to be a part of resource mobilization. And let's see, I said there's 4. There's worth, there's witness. Oh, and work. People who will roll up their sleeves and be a part of focus groups and stakeholder sessions, and perhaps even writing of surveys or making phone calls, but really being engaged. So the 5 Ws, I think, are really relative to resource mobilization. And then, of course, I've already hit on administrative and operational management. None of this works if there's nobody or no organization or no support that is scheduling the meetings, that is following up, that's keeping the leadership on task. Now I'm trying to get to my next slide. There we go. Nope, sorry. Do you see, what slide do you see?
So we are seeing requirements.
Okay, for some reason I'm not there when it advanced. Sorry, thank you, Cece. So we talk about as you're moving forward about utilizing the collective impact model. As you're planning and preparing, these are some strategies that need to be in your thought process, and as you move forward. Of course, you need to secure strong leadership. You might know, oftentimes you might have some folks come to you and say, hey, or you might have business leaders come to you who say, we need to clear this hurdle. And then my response back is, okay, you're bringing us this issue. Will you lead? If not you, who in the community could be the strong leadership to help us bring the collective together to create this path forward? So you need to have strong leadership. You need to establish the formal structure of how you're going to operate. We're going to meet quarterly, and subcommittees are going to be engaged, and those subcommittees are going to meet bi-monthly. We're going to have. Are you going to have notes? Are you going to have note takers? You do need to create a formal structure. I think I've hit this nail on the head already. You need to engage diverse organizations, diverse community leaders, and residents. We work for our community, and our roles are to grow and sustain our communities. And our community involves everyone. And so do your best to bring voices to the table. Now, you can invite them to the table. They won't always come, or they'll come to the table and then they won't stick around. But you need to bring diverse organizations and people and community stakeholders to the table. And you need to ensure that everything is authentic and shared. I find that when we bring folks to the table who maybe I don't see on a regular basis, I always am sensitive about making sure everybody feels welcome. We all know what it's like to go into a room where maybe we don't know people, or there are people who we don't see on a regular basis. And sometimes there's a bit of awkwardness, or I'm not sure why I'm here. I'm not sure that I belong here. I always want to make sure that when we're convening something, that those people are made to feel welcome, that the people who maybe aren't always in my everyday sphere of influence feel welcome. And that's where being authentic comes into place. Involving young people, making sure, again, we're talking about all of our community. Does your mayor and your community have a youth council? Well, make sure, if so, make sure to invite participants of the mayor's youth council. Do you have a youth leadership program in your community? Look for those areas. Maybe it's 4-H. Make sure you're engaging youth leadership, and that also includes those of us who have colleges and universities in our communities, and include them as well. Together, you want to be sure and develop a shared vision. You want to conduct a needs assessment. We believe that we have an issue with access to healthcare, to childcare, but where's the data to back that up? Because eventually, as you do your strategic plan, you're going to need to fundraise at some point. And a lot of donors respond. In fact, I don't know many donors who don't. A lot of donors respond to data. It's all good and well to say we need access to childcare, but if we say we need access to childcare, and we know that there are 3,000 folks in our region who, if they had childcare today, would be in the workforce tomorrow, then fundraising becomes a little bit more easy. Get the needs assessment done, create a strategic plan, implement mutually reinforcing strategies across the board, create your fundraising strategy, establish channels for internal, and I should have their external communications. Educate the community. Let your community know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Conduct a process of evaluations. You want to move as you move forward. You always want to be taking the internal temperature as a group. How are we doing? Are you seeing value in what we're doing? Do we need to make changes in our processes or procedures? And evaluate the community mobilizations effort. You want to evaluate that effort separately or outside from the committee. Those are some strategies you need to be aware of as you move forward. Types of community development. Remember, there are projects that typically are aimed at strengthening our community or strengthening the community in one way or another. This slide gives you some examples of communities who've come together utilizing the collective impact to move the needle. Years ago, Memphis did a Fast Forward program that was based on early childhood education. The same with Cincinnati Strives for Success. That was focused around education. The Elizabeth River Project, that was about the Chesapeake Bay watershed, saving the watershed, cleaning it up. The last three are relevant to my organization. We've created a regional workforce roadmap. And so rather than being an isolated collaborative that just our organization put together to try and create initiatives and opportunities to solve some of our workforce hurdles, we brought everybody together who is engaged in workforce. The folks engaged in homeless population, getting homeless into temporary housing, into permanent housing, into jobs. Citizens returning to the workforce. Everybody who touches workforce, we pulled them together. Not just the people in the region who say, I do workforce, I'm your workforce leader, but them and then everybody beyond them. Live Healthy Lynchburg, years ago, our community really wanted to focus on becoming a more healthy region. So using the collective impact model, we brought business and industry, citizens, healthcare, restaurants, nonprofit folks together, the fitness sector, all together on what can we do as a community and a region to change our fitness as a community. And fast forward to today, we've got a top 25 10-mile race in the country. And that they spent years working on that. Where is Live Healthy Lynchburg today? They are still moving forward. Their initiatives aren't as aggressive as they once were because the data has changed. The data, they move the needle with their case studies and their assessments and their initiatives. And then recently we had a group, not the Alliance, launch a collective impact model called Lynchburg Today. And that was focusing on bringing together a diverse sector of community leaders and stakeholders to talk about what they perceive that the 5 opportunities for change in the region are. And so that group is focusing on neighborhood development, leadership development for underserved communities, hunger, and exercise and fitness, exposure to the youth of our youngest citizens who don't have access to baseball fields or baseball equipment or those sorts of athletic activities. It's exposing them to softball, basketball, disc golf, and so forth. When you get into the collective impact model, and honestly, I think a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about, it relates to everything we do. We want to be inclusive. We want to have clear goals. We want to have clear strategies for reasons for doing what we're doing. But just like anything else we're doing, there are dangers. When you're working in a collective impact model, here's a list of some dangers for you to be aware of. Sometimes everybody can be really focused on a strategy, and then you have strategy drift, or the culture of the collective group starts to change. Treating work groups like committees, that also can be a danger because committees never end. Work groups have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Lack of transparency is always a danger. Having the wrong people at the table can be a danger, and then or not having the right people at the table. Lack of accountability. Always want to have accountability when you're working on large or small initiatives. Funder and political hijacking is very real. I think in our sector, in our industry, in chamber and community, economic development, nonprofit management, political hijacking is real. We are the sane center. And our role is to solve problems, to clear hurdles, and to bring everybody together to find the best way to do that. And political hijacking, I think, is probably the most real danger that we see these days. Managing a network like an organization, insufficient timeframes. We've got to have realistic timeframes, just like we have to have realistic goals. And in closing, I want you to keep in mind that clear strategy guides clear commitment. I have found that oftentimes if we bring groups together and I think that there's a lot of resistance, sometimes it's because I or the collective hasn't provided enough clarity. So clear strategy guides clear commitment. And if you see people who are being really resistant, oftentimes the resistance isn't because they don't like you, they don't like the idea, it's that they lack the clarity of what we're doing. So remember that clear strategy guides clear commitment. Form follows function, and culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. I have in the PowerPoint some resources for you. This collective impact model, I really like the Stanford Social Innovative Renew. They did there was a collective impact report, really fabulous, easy to understand. I would encourage you to grab that article and read it. And I'm also a big fan of the book Switch, which is great at helping people manage change. Anyone? Questions? Are you awake? I really appreciate CC and the U.S. Chamber for inviting me to do this. I hope you've gotten some nuggets out of it. But this is my contact information. You can call me anytime. The U.S. Chamber has provided me a lot of really great opportunities and a lot of great professional development. I'm always happy to give back. Questions,
Excellent.
CC?
Yeah, it looks like we have a question here in the chat. Hattie Henna being so awesome. And what are some ways to persuade city officials into a growth strategy? And it looks like Heather may have a question as well.
Sure. I think so. The question is how to persuade elected officials into a growth strategy. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I think that when engaging with elected officials, I think having conversations one-on-one about what is a growth strategy, why is it important, and what do they think about it. I think I'd go on that. Initially, I would have that conversation with them and then present to them as a group. I also find that when we're trying to persuade folks to go in a certain direction, having your key business leaders beside you makes a difference. So for me, having my board chair with me or key influencers with me when I have that discussion is also helpful.
Excellent. And we do have a question as well. Heather, did you have a question?
I did. I put it in the chat too, but Megan, great job. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
For sharing today. I was just interested, if you back up to the very start of, talking about, if, let's say a chamber was to merge with an ED, I guess my question is, do you kind of start with a core group of believers in that concept and then bring it forth? Or like how do you go about it without coming off like self-serving? Like
Sure. Heather, my advice in that scenario is that it needs to be driven by the private sector. So and I'll use our organization as an example. At the time, I was running the Regional Economic Development Organization, and Christine Kennedy, who is an amazing rock star, was the interim director of the chamber. And she had a strategic planning session with her board. And her board asked the question, asked a couple questions about, is there a better way? And Christine said, yeah, but you all have to lead. So in that scenario, Christine eventually pulled me to the table with those key business leaders, and we educated them on different formats of organizations. And then they noodled it over, and then they, as the funders and the influencers and the business leaders, they took the ball and ran with it, leaving the two organizations, Christine and I, to be support in the background. If it were at the time the Regional Economic Development Organization saying let's do this, or the chamber let's do this, the egos would come into play. Now, fortunately, in our scenario, neither Christine or I had this giant ego that said no, because you don't want to look like one organization is taking over the other. You go at it from a business sense. There's a time and a place where it will or it won't make sense. So my advice is you identify a key business leaders and have a small group discussion about, is this realistic? Is there real value to this? And let them percolate on it, but you want them to lead. And what we did is this small group of individuals pulled a group together from the EDO executive board and the chamber executive board, and they got together for about 4 months, in some ways spinning their wheels, but really talking through stuff before they finally said, we have experts in the room. Let's ask them to go and research and do the assessment. And then brought that back to this group. And then from there they went, but it needs to be led by somebody other than you.
Yes. Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Very much. Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
And Megan, we have a couple questions and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
Vanessa asked if someone would like a deeper dive on this kind of training, where would you send them?
If they want a deeper dive
on this topic, where would you send
well,
them?
I definitely I definitely go and read this article, the collective impact model written by John and Mark Kramer. I would start there. That's the best place to start. And then you can see some of these other resources here. But when I'm talking to folks about the collective impact model, that article really is one of the best I've seen.
Excellent. And what to do if your community is very conservative and you are concerned about their input? We have engaged the chamber, who has to deal with the lack of support.
Ask that question again.
Yeah. What do you do if your community is very conservative and you are concerned about their input? It sounds like they've engaged the chamber, who has to deal with the lack of support.
Well, collective impact is about people who are conservative and not conservative. Collective impact is bringing all, our communities are made up of everybody. Everybody is in our community. Everybody's in your community. You may not see them because they may not be, they're just not in your daily daily vision. But conservative or non-conservative, if you have a hurdle, if you have an aspiration, everybody will succeed as a result of your work. So you need to we are that same center, and we come together and we create that clear agenda. Some people may think, childcare, that's not a community problem. That's an individual's problem. Okay. But show them how it is the community's problem and they'll come to the table. So if you have a community that's more conservative, I don't know if you mean I don't think that. I think that even the most conservative people want to solve problems. And there are those individuals who will come together with other people who think differently to solve a problem. And you as the leader need to do your best to talk about where's the common ground. And sometimes you have to find that common ground and then bring it to them. But just because a community is more or less conservative, you can still convene them and those stakeholders, because really it ends up opening everybody's eyes.
Okay. And it sounds like there was some context provided with the elected leaders causing issues. It sounds like defunding many good programs and efforts are in place to recall them.
Well, personalities do play a role. But as a leader, if we can have consistent communication with our elected officials and our stakeholders, then they're more apt to listen when we come together to try and solve a problem or clear a hurdle. But it is so difficult. Collaboration. I mean, how many of you have said it'd be so much easier if I'm just going to do this ourselves. We're just going to do this ourselves. We know we've read the data, we've read the articles. We're just going to do this ourselves. And then you think you've solved a problem. Somebody comes in and says, well, what about, right? It's easier than to go through the headache of trying to collaborate. But the collaboration is so worth it because everybody has ownership in the success. Everybody has ownership in the process. And so collaboration and communication are the hardest parts. And communication in what we do every day is about relationship building. We're not in transactional business. We are in relational.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Megan. We really appreciate it. I know I've learned a lot today, and it sounds like a lot of people are taking away some great things here. And just to wrap up, we did have some questions in the chat about, will the presentation be available? Will there be a recording? Yes to both. Those are housed in our webinars and resource center and available typically about 48 hours after. So we'll have the presentation available shortly and then the recording to follow. And just as a reminder, as a CAE and CCE approved provider, you're welcome to credit and points for attendance today. Go ahead and email the IOM inbox and we'll get that over to you. And again, thank you so much, Megan, for taking your time, for teaching us all today.
And one last thing, everybody, you're all invited to come visit the Lynchburg region. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner will be on me. And thanks for being in what I think is the world's greatest profession. You're making an impact in your community every day. And I see you and I appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you, Megan.